Okay, so good evening, everyone, wherever you're joining in. You're most welcome to this session. It is really an honor to present or facilitate on this important topic, which is about data literacy for HSE. Now, data has become a big thing now in today's world of work. Data is literally what helps business to make informed decisions. And HSC career or HSC profession is no exception. So it is really important that, safety professionals really understand what data is all about. And then that is really the reason why we are here with regards to this very topic. All right. So I'm going to be exploring the topic on HSC, data literacy for HSC, and the fact that this gives competitive advantage for today's safety professional. All right, so without wasting time, I'll just do a quick introduction of myself. I'm an health and safety practitioner who has been practicing for the past 13 years. I started my career as far back as 2011, working for a downstream oil and gas company, and that was the first time I actually started using Microsoft Excel. So I've been using data tools for close to 13 years. And then along, you know, my career path, then I started working with Power BI. So I worked for, Next Drilling, and I started using Power BI. And that was another experience altogether as far as using data tools is concerned. So I'm HS consultant working for Shexel. I'm an instructor and working for Shexel Data Academy. I'm actually the founder of Shexel and Shexel Data Academy. I'm also a community builder. So we are actually growing a community of data experts or safety professionals who want to understand data, learn how to use data tools, and improve upon their data literacy. So the mission for me is very simple. We want to make QHSE reporting much easier and fun. All right, so basically, we are going to look at what data is all about. It is really important that we understand what are the sources of data when it comes to health and safety. So we are looking at data literacy in the HSE context. So we're going to look at the types of data. We look at some of the data problems that we have in HSE. We would also, try to really emphasize the importance of treating data as an asset and not paperwork. We're going to look at some of the core skills that safety professionals need as far as data is concerned, how we can improve decision with data, and why organizations need safety, HSE data analysts. So we're going to also look at the future of data literacy and analytics and how you can start your journey if you're interested. All right. So the big question is, what is HSE data literacy? All right. Now, when it comes to data literacy, it is really about being able to read data, understand data, analyze data, and communicate data in a meaningful way that helps businesses to make decisions. All right. So the question is that, are you a data literate person? Okay. Do you, hold on. I think my screen is not, hold on, let me see. All right. So data literacy is about ability to read, understand, analyze, and communicate data in a meaningful way. All right. So it really requires us to understand what data is. So what is HSE data? How do we work with health and safety data? How do we analyze the data? How do we interpret and communicate data through storytelling? All right. So the fact is that every safety professional needs data literacy. It is really important that we move away from reactive to proactive to predictive safety. Now, when it comes to reactive, we are waiting for something to happen before we intervene. We are literally doing a lot of paperwork. We are doing a lot of manual reporting, and a lot of things can slip through the cracks if you're not paying attention. But when we are able to harness the full potential of data, then we're able to extract insights from data to be able to make some predictions. Okay, so we are going to look at some of the stages of really making good use of data as safety professionals. Again, safety professionals, our job always requires us to make recommendations, to top management to make some investments. So every safety initiative is actually, you know, looked at in the context of cost-benefit analysis, that what is the cost to us, what is the benefit, if we implement an improvement within the workplace, whether engineering control or, any type of administrative and things like that. It is really important that we support any safety improvement with data. So we need evidence to be able to support budgetary allocation. Again, as we are talking about safety improvements, we need data to support that. And with data, we'll be able to detect trends. So we are going to look at the various sources of data and we can understand, the fact that incident data is an important insight for us once we're able to extract them to be able to make predictions or be able to make some proactive interventions. Again, whenever we, maximize the value of data in our decision making, we look more credible to top management because we don't make decisions based on guesswork. We're able to, pinpoint exactly, the priority areas based on data. And for that reason, top management is able to allocate resources and they're confident in the recommendations that we make. So it boosts our credibility. And again, it helps us to stand out as safety professionals. And that gives us competitive advantage. We're able to get promotion opportunities because we bring more value to the table, apart from just, doing our regular work with regards to inspections and audits and asset investigation, things like that. Okay, so definitely we all need to be data literate because it is part and parcel of our work as safety professionals. And that is pretty much it. Okay, so we are going back to the basics to understand what is data all about. Okay, so data is basically everything that is in its raw state. It could be a fact, it could be a number, it could be words, it could be observations, it could be every type of information that you gather from a type of activity. All right, so this activity always is about health and safety activity because you're looking at health and safety context, right? So a number of these activities can be inspections. So every day you're doing your, workplace inspections, you are doing, safety walkthroughs, you are carrying out, you know, spot checks, you are doing your environmental monitoring, you are, doing your training, you are doing supply evaluation, you are checking, you are doing maintenance on your equipment. All of these activities are very important and you are also going to be, generating data through these activities. And that is the reason why when you look at your management system, a lot of these activities, you are using a particular form or a checklist, which you need to input the data. So we are collecting data, we are generating data from all of this activity. But the big question is, what do we do with the data and how do we harness this data for decision making? Okay. So also, just going back to the basic, we are looking at the types of data, quantitative data, qualitative data. It's just for us to refresh our mind because these types of data gives us insights with regards to the type of analysis we can do on them. So we have quantitative data, which is data that can be quantified in numerical values. And then qualitative data is data that cannot be quantified in numerical values. For that reason, they have to be categorized. Okay. So example of quantitative data would be the fact that you are doing your toolbox stocks, and for that reason, you want to be counting how many toolbox stocks you've been having every month. Or you can also be counting how many incidents have you been recording. You can talk about how many inspections. So these are often related to all our KPIs, the metrics that we've been tracking. Most of them are based on numbers, and we need to really have a system that helps us to collect and we can extract insights from it. We also deal with qualitative data, and that has to do with, things like surveys. You do your survey, you do an audit, and you want to know the quality of the information that you are gathering. That information could be it could be categorized. So such type of data, oftentimes you are using some type of ranking, high, medium, and low. For example, when it comes to risk assessment, apart from the fact that we can be counting risk assessment, we can equally be looking at the risk ratings. We are rating risk on a scale of 1 to 5, but we are looking at it in terms of qualitative. So low risk, medium risk, high risk, we can do some analysis based on this data. So we are looking at our workplace our activities that we carry out, it is really important that we understand all the types of data that we generate, those that are qualitative, those that are quantitative. The common practice for a lot of people is the fact that they only focus on the quantitative. So when you go to maybe a typical workplace, you're doing some audits, you're checking records, you want to see how did they measure performance. All you see is probably numbers. Okay, so it's a common trend that in health and safety, you're looking at our HSE statistics and all of that. So we do quite well with some of these activities, but when it comes to the qualitative, sometimes we are lacking because we are not able to look at the context of this qualitative data, the activities that we are using to generate this data, and the kind of analysis that we can do from it. So oftentimes people are not doing, you know, employee appraisals, they're not doing customer satisfaction survey, they are not doing training evaluation, they are not doing um, any type of survey that helps us to gather qualitative data because we are not able to really understand how to leverage this type of data. So, as safety professionals, it is really important that we know all of this. Okay, so I'm just going to move on to the next slide, and that has to do with, the data life cycle. Okay, so data has a life cycle. We create the data from an activity. That data has to be collected and stored somewhere. And then we need to extract insight from the data and use it. Now, the insight that we extract, we put it in a format that is easy to share. And then once we share and the data, the data that has been used has been shared, we archive it and eventually we delete it. So that's always the life cycle of a data or life cycle of data. Okay, so it is always important that we look at the bigger picture of all the things that we are doing. How do we go through this cycle to ensure that we are making the best use of the data for decision making? There are some instances where people only create the data. They never even know how to store it. They never know how to extract insight. They never know how to share the data. They don't know how data has to be archived and deleted, or probably they only focus on creating and archiving and deleting. And it tend to gather dust because it doesn't add any value to health and safety within their workplaces. Okay. And whenever we have situations like that, what it means is that the safety professionals don't bring any value as far as top management is concerned, and they are only sort of playing a role just by virtue of compliance requirements. So whenever there's a regulator coming, that's when now they're looking for the safety professional, or whenever there's an investigation or accident that has to be investigated, that's when now they look for the safety professional. But if you're looking at the bigger scope of all of these activities or all of this process of data, then we are going to build the right skills that helps us to really present much better, value to our company because they know that we understand the entire flow of data. Okay. Now, the common problems that we face as, safety professionals or in the HSE space is the fact that many a times we lack the system for data collection. Okay. The system for data collection, if you are lucky, you would be using a checklist, a formal checklist, and that would mean that you have a management system in place, you have all the relevant documentation, so you have the things that allows you to collect the data. So you collect them on forms and checklists, right? And then you are probably going to store them somewhere. But then it sort of ends right there. And a lot of companies don't even have a system that helps them to collect data. So those processes that they are they are sort of implementing that are not documented, they lose sight of important data that they need to be collecting. Another common problem that we face in HSC is the fact that we don't have the competence to use the data tool. So those who are supposed to be making data entries, or those who are supposed to be reporting, they don't know how to use the data tools. They don't know how to collect the data, organize the data, and put them in a format that is easy for analysis. And again, another challenge is that the fact that we could be underreporting data within the workplace because nobody's paying attention to the fact that the activities that are being carried out is data that is being generated. And for that reason, there has to be a system of data collection. So there's underreporting. So you go to a workplace, you're trying to do an audit, and you know that you suddenly realize that they don't have anything to report on. Even they don't even have records of a lot of things that they are doing. So if you don't have records, therefore you don't even have data to be collating. And then again, we are talking about inconsistent records keeping, because a lot of the activities that we carry out, we're supposed to keep documentary evidence of them. So if you lose sight of lack of records keeping, then you're losing sight of data. All right. And then the fact that in a traditional system, a lot of documents and files and folders are scattered all over. So there's no unified system for collecting and storing the data. So a lot of things could be scattered. All right. And then wrong data being reported, because the system for collecting data does not streamline data integrity in terms of accurate information being collated or being collected. All right. So this can be applied to every type of health and safety activity. All right. For example, if you are talking about health surveillance as an activity, there has to be a system that helps us to collect data of the employees that are being assessed, the health surveillance of the workers, right? Every employee that have been evaluated, it has to be logged into a system. And based on, some important criteria, which has to do with probably data protection, data privacy, you still have to have a system of collecting data and protecting data and maintaining the integrity of the data. But because you have professionals who are not aware of the value of data, they don't have the skills to know what type of tool they are supposed to be using. It could be Excel, it could be any type of advanced tool that helps them to collect the data, and then under reporting. So this challenge can be applied to a lot of health and safety activities. All right. So now the big question is, what is HSE data analytics? All right. So we started looking at data literacy. Data literacy is about understanding the data, being able to interrogate the data, being able to analyze and extract and communicate the data. Now, this can equally be applied to HS data analytics. So when it comes to data literacy, you probably will not have to know how to use data tools, but you should know how to interrogate data and ask the right questions. But when it comes to data analytics, then you are going through a structured process of extracting insight from data. And that starts from the process of identifying the data that you are working with, the process of collecting the data. All right. So you need to identify what data am I supposed to be collecting based on a type of activity. Maybe the activity is the fact that you want to inspect all your workplace vehicles. You want to ensure that your vehicles at the workplace are fit for purpose. Every defect from the vehicle is captured and then is worked on to ensure that those vehicles don't cause any workplace accidents or any road traffic crashes. So this activity that you're trying to, this activity, you need to identify what data am I supposed to collect from this. So you want to know the vehicle, unique the vehicle particulars. You want to know the person who does the inspection. You want to have a checklist that helps them to do the inspection. You need to ensure that those checklists are sort of collected, and then the important information that are relevant is logged in a particular system. It could be the fact that you are logging every defect in an Excel sheet. All right. Now that process of data collection can equally be automated. I mean, you could use various systems. You could use a form. You could use a data entry form. You could use a mobile application, or you could just use the paper-based approach, which is like a checklist. But the most important thing is that data that the person has provided in the form and checklist, what do you do with it? Do you collect it? What system do you use to organize that type of data? And the fact is that whenever it comes to data collection, there's likely to be mistakes here and there. So there's always human error when it comes to completing a form. People would type in wrong dates, people would misspell information, they would, sort of create some duplicated entries or duplicate entries in the data system that we are using, or they could be given wrong information. How do we identify all of this and clean up the data? So it takes us to the next stage, which is data cleaning. And then once we clean up the data, we can be able to prepare the data for analysis. Then analysis is all about exploring the data to uncover insights. So this one has to do with asking the right questions. So data analysts are part and parcel of the whole, business where they understand the strategic goals, they understand the corporate objectives, goals, strategic goals, all of these stuff. And then they know what kind of activities they are tracking, what kind of data they are collecting, how they clean and analyze, asking those, trying to answer those key insights or key questions that management is interested in. All right. And then again, once we're able to analyze the data, we present them in formats that is easy to understand. So we are going to be using visuals, we use, various graphs and charts and all of that. So that's the whole process of data analysis. So this is a very structured process, and this process requires using some data tools, and you cannot bypass any of it. Once you bypass any of this, the chance of producing wrong results would sort of, be very, very likely. And for that reason, what it means is that we are going to be sharing unreliable information, and we are going to look bad because at the end of the day, we are giving them wrong report for decision. And you can imagine how, as a safety professional, you keep giving wrong reports. I mean, there are instances where you send a report to your management, you send it to an email, and then you know that the report that you sent is wrong. And because it is wrong, they're going to query you, they're going to get back to you, and you look bad. You don't bring much value to the table, and that can affect your credibility as a professional. All right. So this process, the data analytics part, it may look like a type of skill that is very, very complex, but the fact is that we are all using some data tools, we are all using Excel, and it is really important that we know all of this. So why are we talking about HS data analytics? Okay, so one thing that we need to bear in mind is that data is actually the new oil. So in recent times, whenever we are talking about, the new skills that have cropped up, and the fact that there's so much talk about tech and artificial intelligence and all of this, you realize that data analytics is part and parcel of it. And just because companies are beginning to become aware about what data can do, and the fact that with more advanced technology, we can make good use of data. So safety professionals, generate data more than any other profession because our work is evidence-based, and everything that you're doing, you need to have records, and those records are containing data. So I can tell you for a fact that HSE is one of those careers that you have a lot of data to deal with. And that's how come at the end of the month, you have to send a lot of reports. Depending on the scope of work, you'll be sending reports for end of month, you'll be sending report for a lot of things. And that is also the reason why we have a lot of folders, and within our offices, you have a lot of folders of a lot of things that we are doing. But the thing is that those folders are containing these records. They are just gathering dust and they're in the folder. The traditional approach to safety is that those records are only what you use to present to auditors that, yes, I'm doing my permits, I'm controlling high risk activities, so I have my permits. These are the permits that have been, sort of reason for controlling these activities. Oh, okay, I've been doing some inspections. These are the records that we have. That is a traditional approach. But the thing is that if we really want to let our management see that we are not only gathering papers in the office, but we want them to know that yes, those data that we are collecting, we do something with it, and we can share a report with them at the end of the month, then begin to see us as partners in the business. Okay, so it is an important skill in HSC. It gives competitive advantage in the job market because within your workplace, you can get opportunity to, you know, be promoted because now you bring a lot more value to your top management. They know your worth. And then the fact is that data now cut across almost all walks of life, right? So every career, they have data that they handle or they generate. And so when you build a skill in data analytics, you're able to transfer your skill to other areas. But the fact is that we are SIG professionals and we are probably comfortable within our space. Okay. But some of us, based on what we do get people from different, different professions. telling us they want us to analyze their data for them. So in terms of, return on investment, as per se, what it means is that you can be able to transfer your skill to other fields just because you've positioned yourself for opportunities. Okay. So again, with data, we're able to drive decision. We're able to become influence decision strategically within our company. It enhances our problem-solving skills because this process involves asking questions and finding ways of producing answers. All right. And depending on the type of tool that you're using, you're going to be learning how you can sort of create a sort of measure, or we call this function, some calculations that you need to be doing. So it enhances your problem solving skill. If it's something that you are committed to, you realize that your analytical skills begin to improve. And then you position yourself for what we call digital transformation. So now, if you were paying attention, we talked about the fact that we are collecting the data, we identifying the activity, we are collecting the data. Now, the data collection itself, that process of data collection, the traditional approach is that we are using paper, checklist, and all of that. When we're talking about digital transformation, then we are looking at what digital tool do you use to collect the data. So that's why in advanced world, they are using, digital. There's so much talk about digitization, and they are using, mobile applications for hazard reporting. They are, using a tablet for, some type of inspection. They are reporting with tablet. Now, the interesting thing that you need to be aware of is the fact that that information that they are logging into a tablet, that is going straight to a database. In a traditional approach, that is being gathered in paper form, and is in a folder gathering that. But in the digital approach, it is going straight into a database. So you can imagine all the files that you have in your folder sitting in your office. You can imagine the amount of data that is sitting there. If you had a system that sort of brings everything into a database, trust me, you can do a lot of analysis. And then the value of that data becomes very important to your top management. So the digitization or digital transformation is really, really the reason why we are talking about data analytics. Again, as I did mention, management will see you as a business partner. All right. So definitely, this is an interesting career path for a lot of professions. So those who are young, the upcoming safety guys, and even the experienced ones, based on your scope of work, you can position yourself as that person who understands, who has good data literacy and knows how to use data tools. And for that reason, they can see themselves as data analysts. All right. And that process is very simple. You are collecting, you are cleaning, you are analyzing data to share insights. So you probably want to build the skills for creating dashboards. You want to build the skills for every type of activity you are doing. You just understand that the data must be collected, the data must be organized, the data must be cleaned, it has to be extracted, insight must be extracted. So that is just one opportunity that you can focus on. Again, depending on the tool that you're using, especially Power BI, which is one of the data tools we use, people can position themselves as Power BI specialists. Now, there are companies that use Power BI, and for that reason, every activity they are doing, every KPI that they want to track, they want it to be on Power BI. And just because they are working online, they don't do offline Excel type of solutions. Everything is online. So depending on your workplace, you can be the one who is there as a Power BI specialist. As I did mention at the beginning of my introduction, I was working for Mex Drilling as far back as 2018. I was using Power BI then, and I was generating my report in Power BI. I'll share it to my top management. I felt very good about myself. The only thing is that they have a data center, in Denmark, and for that reason, my report doesn't feed into their system. So I was literally focusing on only Ghana. And my top management, my unit director was very proud of me because I made him feel good. When I send him my reports, he goes for meetings and he's happy that, okay, Solomon has provided me with Power BI dashboard, and I like it. So you look very good. Now you can also be the one who is the safety performance analyst. So safety performance, as we're talking about performance, HS performance, we're talking about the lagging indicators, the leading indicators, And this is covering all types of activities, right? So, we all know what lagging indicators and leading indicators are. You're going to be, very focused on all of these metrics and KPIs and ensure that every activity, you are the one looking at how they collect the data, how clean is the data, where are they storing the data, and all of these stuff. So you can bring a lot more value when you are focused on this, and you can be the one who is a safety performance analyst. Again, I can tell you for a fact, or I can bet on the fact that at your workplace, you're using paper. It is paper-based. All right. You could be the one driving digital transformation at your workplace. And trust me, when you go to your top management and you tell them, hey, I've learned some data skills, understand the full scope of data analysis, and I really want to transform our health and safety management and make sure it is digitized. And I understand the tools that I'm supposed to be using for data collection, using mobiles and desktop, all right, and how I can organize the data. We're going to use these kind of tools, SharePoint and all of that. Okay, so it definitely requires you to be very focused on technology. So with this massive technological advancement and the age of the fact that there's so much AI, um, AI transforming almost everything that we are doing in recent time, you will be the one who is driving a change in your workplace. And again, even when it comes to safety systems, the safety management system as a whole, if you're a consultant, you don't even have to go and be giving your client a paper-based system, sorry, this kind of management system, electronic document, and say that you develop the system for them. You'll be looking at how you can host all of this on an online platform so that you have an end-to-end solution that enables them to improve, retain a lot of records and collect a lot of data and generate a lot of insights with a lot of report and dashboard for ISO certification. So this then makes ISO certification much easier for the company because then they have a lot of records, a lot of data to show how they are performing as far as their management system is concerned. So when it comes to data analytics, which is all about analyzing data, there are various stages of it, or the various types of it. Now, each of these types, they are not in isolation. They are all interrelated. And it depends on which stage you are in, right? So we can start from the descriptive. So descriptive analysis is all about asking what happened. What happened? So we're going to look at some of the questions that we ask to know what happened with our activity, the activity that we carried out, the fact that we are working, we are doing some type of operations, but then there was an accident that happened. So the question they're going to ask is that what happened? And they can ask, so what is the trend of our incidents as far as this activity is concerned? So then you are going to look at historical data. So if you are not looking at a lot of the activities and collecting data, you cannot be able to explain what happened. Okay. So what happened is all about leveraging the data that we've been collecting from every health and safety activity and then interrogating the question by asking, what is this? What is that? Okay, we're going to be looking at some of the questions. The next one is that after we have collected the data and we've interrogated it to know what happened, the next stage is why did it happen? Okay, so then we are trying to do some root cause analysis. So this one comes from some type of activities that enables us to ask why. And that is investigation, root cause analysis, and all of that. And then beyond that point, you're looking at what will happen. You are predicting. So based on the historical data and the insight that we've gathered, and the knowing why, we can now know what will happen. So based on the data, we can then do some forecasting to know that because you are recording a lot of unsafe condition or unsafe acts, or a lot of workers are working and they are not using hands-free tools for a lot of manual work, or they're not using tagline, they don't like using tagline for lifting operation, then there's a potential for a line of fire injury. So we can predict based on a particular workplace because of a common occurrence of a certain unsafe act. Then we are looking at beyond what will happen. We can now see what actions can we take to prevent, an accident from happening. So then, what it simply means is that we cannot jump straight to giving recommendation to our top management about some safety initiatives without really going through what happened, why did it happen, what will happen, and what actions you have to take. So if you go to your top management, you're telling them, okay, I need to procure a type of tool or a type of equipment because they'll ask you, okay, so why do you need this? Why do you need this type of equipment? Then you'd have to sort of explain, okay, these things are happening every now and then. Okay, what is the evidence? What data do you have to support that an unsafe act has been happening or workers are exposed to, line of fire hazards or, the workplace layout is very, very small. And for that reason, they are exposed to mobile equipment. And for that reason, we need to implement a certain engineering control. Let's use that as an example. You definitely have to explain what happened. You need to then go back to really give reason why that happened. And for that reason, you could predict that this is what will happen. And for that reason, we need to ensure that these interventions are in place. Okay, so I'm speaking in broad sense, but this can be applied to any type of safety initiative that you want to introduce at the workplace. And the last one is using AI. So right now we are in the era where AI is able to do a lot of things. So all these process of analysis, you can use AI. And so most of the data tools that are there, there's Copilot that helps us to quickly do some analysis. And there are even more advanced sort of programs that sort of does analysis on its own. So they call it doing data analysis with machines, right? So that's pretty much it. These are the stages of data analytics. So if you are sort of jumping to giving suggestions without going through these stages or these processes, then what it means is that you're likely going to get a pushback from management and you get a buy-in. So it will not see you as a partner. So what stage are you at your workplace? All right. What stage are you at your workplace as far as analyzing data is concerned? Okay. So the question we are asking, as at now, can you tell us your non-conformance closure rate at this time as we speak right now? Are you able to interrogate the data that you are generating to know the closure rate for your non-conformance, or let's say the corrective actions that you've raised? What is the closure rate? Are you able to tell? If you're not able to tell, it simply means that you don't have a system for collecting data. All the monitoring activities that you're carrying out, all the non-conformance that you are or that are being raised. Okay, so NCR is usually coming from audits. But even when it comes to defects of equipment and all of that, there's no system of really knowing that these are NCRs or these are defects and you need to close them. So you don't have an action tracking register or anything. So that's the challenge you have if you are not able to answer this question. What is your health and safety training score? Are you able to tell your score as far as training is concerned at this very moment? Do you have the data to support that my training completion score is probably 90%? How do you come about the 90%? There has to be a data to support it. What is your permit to work compliance score? Okay, so it could be that you're supposed to be, permit to work must follow a particular criteria. There should be no sort of deviation. So you are doing some audits, and as you carry out your audits, you want to check the level of compliance. So even with this one, the data that you are gathering is qualitative data. You are doing the audit, you're following a particular criteria, you're ranking the criteria, the findings, you should be able to estimate a score. So if you are data savvy, you look at how do you estimate a score with the data. Document control, accuracy rates, spill incident rates. So we are even talking about lag indicators, lost time injury frequency rate. Do you have the metrics that support it? Are you collating your LTIs? Are you recording your man hours? Do you know how to calculate all of this? Your toolbox stock participation rate. So these are just a few questions. Now, you need to ask yourself, if you're not able to give an answer relevant to your workplace, what it simply means is that you are not even collecting data in the first place. The diagnostic, as I did mention, now you're asking why. Why was there an NCR? Why do you have low, let's say, corrective action closure rates? So let's make it broad. Why do we have low corrective action closure rates? And we can even be more precise for last month, because every month we have a meeting that everybody should close their actions. And so we have meetings to discuss. And why do we have low for last month? Why do we have a high incident rate? Why do we have it so high incident rate this year? The year has come to an end, and when we did our management review meeting, we went through our incidents, you know, trends, and noticed we have high incident rate. Can you explain why? You should be able to explain. So then you are digging into your root cause, after investigation records, and you probably have a system that you use to collect all the findings, the equipment, the personnel, the time, the month, the incidents are happening. If you have a well-structured system, you can then look within it and say that, okay, it looks like this particular department, they have a problem with a piece of equipment. This equipment is very, defective, and for that reason, or it doesn't have any guard at a particular, rotating part and all of that. And for that reason, a lot of incidents are happening. So there could be a lot of scenarios. Why do you have low training completion rates? So that's pretty much asking why. So that's asking the right questions, right? And then we are talking about predictive, using the data to find out, to predict that this department is likely to have an incident next month. We need to be very proactive about it and ensure that the supervisor that is there, we need to train the supervisor, because it's like he's the leader there. He doesn't know how to control the workplace, or he's not even aware, or he doesn't know his safety responsibilities. We need to do something. We can forecast and say, every time there is so much heat exposure, the heat stress is high, human error increases. And for that reason, this summer, there's likely to be um, you know, a lot of injuries, because we know from the historical data, from our investigations that we've been doing, we know for sure that whenever that we are in the summer season, because of heat stress, a lot of human errors and all that. So this is based on data. Okay, identify employees who are at higher risk. You can say a lot of these type of workers who come to our workplace from history, based on all the incidents that we've been investigating, always this particular type of employees, maybe they are unsafe, maybe they are coming from a particular country. You could be like, this type of people from this country, they are very, very careless, or maybe new workers who come to our workplace. The first 3 months when we have new employees, they're likely to cause an injury to themselves, because they're not familiar with the workplace. So then let us reinforce our short service employee program, or our buddy system program, just to make sure that the new employees that come from records or from history, we just want to make sure that they don't injure themselves. All right. So that's pretty much it. So from predictive, we go to prescriptive. And that's when now we can confidently make suggestions to our management. There's no arguments. We need to do training. We need to allocate budget for training, for hands and finger safety, for drop objects prevention, awareness training. We need to allocate resources for, firefighting training. There's no argument, because from the records, from all our analysis and everything, we are supposed to do it. Top managers will not argue, because you have all the data to support it. Okay, so that's pretty much what it is. So we are going through each of these stages in health and safety to ensure that we are able to sort of, make a much bigger impact to management for proper decision making. And this, we are leveraging the system for data collection, analyzing, reporting, and sharing insight. Okay, so data literacy matters for every safety professional. All right, we've already explained a lot of the advantages. You're able to prevent accidents, you're able to optimize resources, scarce resources. So the fact is that Resources are scarce. You can never dispute it. Top management will always tell you, hey, my friend, the budget, we don't have budgetary allocation for this. The sales are low, or we are not getting contracts, so we need to tighten up. So the resource will always be scarce. So if you go and you are making suggestions for safety improvements, you need to ensure that that money that has been allocated is going to really solve the problem, because the fact is that it's very difficult for management to give you budgetary allocation. So now you want to make sure you are optimizing it in areas that will make the most impact. And then again, we are saying it helps you to demonstrate your value as a safety professional, and then you're able to influence leadership. Okay, so that's what it is that we are now entering the new era of safety. The old era is paperwork, reactive approach, a lot of data slip through the cracks. You probably don't even have a system for collecting data. You wait for accident to happen, and then you now take action. Everybody's looking at you that, yeah, the safety guys are in now, they are coming to the investigation. No, the new era is that we are maximizing the value of data, starting from how the data is created, looking at the whole life cycle of data to ensure that we go through the entire process to now predict preventive actions. We are predicting. We don't even wait to say, I'm being proactive. We are predicting this. We know it will happen for sure because there's data that supports it. And so when we go to top management meeting, they can see the value we bring to the table. That these guys, they know they are even predicting solutions for problems that are likely to come and go. And then evidence is always based on insights. And then because of that, the focus is always on the leading indicators, because you are looking at the lagging indicators and then you are driving a lot of proactive interventions, predictive intervention, all of this. And then you can also look at real-time analytics. So real-time analytics will be those who are tech savvy, those who are in the space of things happening in real time. Data is collected in real time. Data is analyzed in real time. Insight is shared in real time, and automation is quickly send an email in real time. The alert has been sent to this person, especially let's say when there's an incident and all of that, or when there's an alarm that has triggered. It could be like a gas alarm, or you know, any type of alarm that is used to identify any unsafe condition. Once it triggers, the automation, real-time reporting streamlines the whole process, and everything is very fast and smooth. That's the kind of safety skills we need, or the data skills that we need. All right, so we are looking at the core data skills, and let's understand the fact that it starts from data collection. So look at yourself. Are you collecting data enough? If you know you are not collecting data enough, you are lacking the core data skills for each as professional. And then data skills is not enough. You need to analyze. And analysis involves using data tools, following the process of data analysis. And then you need to build a skill of data visualization, which is all about storytelling. Because getting the insight, you can get the insight, but if you're able to put it in a summarized form that people can look at it and I'll say, yes, I agree with you. It makes sense. Because when you go to board meetings or you are in top management meetings, they don't have time to be looking too much at details. They are looking at high level information. So they want to look at the trend. Okay, why is there a spike in this month? Why do you have a larger proportion in the pie chart? Why do we have a maximum, data point? Why is that parameter high? That's the question they ask. So you need to tell a story with the relevant chart and dashboard. The other one has to be critical thinking, asking the right question, and then understanding the business, the top management priorities, the health and safety goals, the strategy for the year, the fact that you are part of the decision making, because you drive consultation with key stakeholders whenever you're trying to come up with any initiative. So you know that, okay, you ask the right question because you want to make sure that every activity they are doing, you just want to be there to ensure that the process of data collection is already captured in it. They cannot do something, they don't know how to collect data, they don't know how to, there's no flow of data cycle. You don't even see it in the activity. Then it's going to slip through the cracks, and now maybe auditors come, there's nothing to show. And And then the other one has to do with communication. You should know how to communicate. All right. So you can be communicating through various forums. It could be through your dashboard, it could be through your, you know, your meetings, how you draw insights in your findings to them to be able to appreciate it. So the fact is that communication cut across in health and safety. So it is no brainer that it is part of the data skills that you need. Okay. So how do you improve your data skills? Now let's look at a set of data. So this is like a data that is here. This company, they know how to collect data. You can see that data is structured. They have the date, the employee name, the gender, the age, they have the department, they have the injury type that they are recording, they have the type of incident they are tracking, they have the body parts. So they have an injury log. They've done very well with data collection. So we can give them, some point for that. Now, how do we ensure that they can make more impact in management meeting with this type of data? Because top management doesn't have time to be looking at it. They don't even understand. We can give them something like this. Then we can tell them, okay, so we can tell you based on the data set, we can tell you that they are having a lot of finger injury. Finger injury is 18. Even we can do more. We can have a way of highlighting the fact that finger injury is the one that is high visually. We can tell that this department, production department, is the one that is recording most injuries. We can tell that the male employees, they are the ones causing the most injuries. We can tell that body parts, their finger injury is high. We can tell that the age group, those who are between 20 and 29, they are recording the most injuries. We can also tell that the most injuries coming from medical is always a medical treatment case. We can also tell that cuts is always the injury that is happening at the workplace. So then, based on this data, this is more like descriptive analysis. Based on this data, we should then have a system where within the whole, stages, we should have a system where we are doing accident investigation, and that has its own set of data also. And that data is related to this. Then we try to go and ask why. Then we are trying to do more, exploration into the data to ask why is it this, why is it that. Then we can confidently get to a point where we can see based on this, we can predict what will happen. For that reason, this is why we have to ensure that the hands and finger safety program is much more robust. We need to get a lot of hands-free tools. We need to, basically check the gloves that they are using. They will give you money to invest in all of this stuff. Okay. Then this one also, we are talking about ESG. For those of you who have been following me on maybe LinkedIn and all, we have this ESG dashboard. Again, we are talking about a data set, which I'm not showing here, but you can look at it at a glance. You can make some decisions. So top management decision will be like, okay, so what is our renewable energy use? What is our percentage of water efficiency? What is this? What is that? Based on this, then they can even streamline their KPIs and say, okay, can we try to achieve 100%? Why is that we are wasting so much water at the workplace? Which location exactly? We can even go back to the data set and ask those questions. So sometimes these questions are based on, or these insights are based on the key questions that management is interested in. So as a safety professional, you want to always be part of management meetings. That's why there's, HSE director or the senior most HSE person who is part of top management, and they will bring the message down that top management priorities that this year we are supposed to do this, we are supposed to do that. They go and discuss all the KPIs, and then based on that information, we come and look at how do we collect the data, how do we streamline, how do we report, how do we ensure that we are communicating that we are achieving the target or we are below target. No, the content of the dashboard, it can be a lot of things. Okay, so data improves safety decision, no doubt about that. It helps us to identify patterns. It helps us to predict risk. It helps us to measure our performance. Okay, and there are a lot of analysis that we can do depending on the type of data that we have. Okay, so the one that we showed was injury analysis. This one was ESG analysis. We could be doing near miss analysis. We could be doing root cause analysis. All of this simply means that we have a system or we have an activity that allows us to collect data on near misses or behavior or root causes or whatever. Okay, so what data skills you need? you use Excel. So Excel is number one. Now, Excel is a very big ocean. Excel has so many things. It is important that you look at maximizing the value of Excel as you're using it. You should learn pivot tables, pivot charts. You should know Excel functions. You should know how to do your calculations because that's the power. Excel is very powerful. Okay. And then you can also be using Google Sheets. So both Excel and Google Sheets, we use it to collect data. We use it to organize the data. We use it to clean the data. We use it to create dashboards. Excel and Google Sheet does perfectly that. And then there are other tools like Power BI, which is more business, a corporate tool, because it forms part of the Microsoft ecosystem, so Power Platform. So Power Platform comprises Power BI, Power Automate, SharePoint, Microsoft Teams, a lot of applications, and then all the Microsoft business applications like PowerPoint, Word documents, all these stuff. So the ecosystem is there. And this ecosystem, if you're using Power BI, you are leveraging, like you have a good advantage because you can be able to share a report across platforms and you are very more relevant to the company. There's also Tableau. So these are all data visualization tools. And then again, we don't want to forget the fact that there could be other softwares that your company uses. Okay, so there are proprietary softwares that are being used for data collection, data analysis, data sharing insight from the data, and even sending emails across and all of that. So if you are not using any of this, or you know that you're not good in any of this, you are not building your data skills, and you are going to lose sight on a lot of things. Okay, so data-driven decision brings return on investment. You reduce costs, you are able to respond faster, you're able to optimize resources, you're able to improve culture and safety culture in the company. Okay. And then what is the future of data analytics? Now, it is important that we all brace up because if Excel has been there for all these years, over 10 years, 20 years, 15 years, okay, 15, 20 years, Excel has been there, but you are still saying that you don't know Excel. You don't know how to use Excel. It's not your fault. The fact is that your work doesn't involve you using Excel. Some of us started using Excel in 2011. The first job we got, national service, we are using Excel. We started learning how to do some basic functions, some functions, organize data in a table. We are collecting data and we are putting nicely structured. We are sending us report daily. Then we started using Excel. Maybe your job doesn't require you to use Excel, but the fact is that Excel is on your computer. You have to learn how to use it. You should learn how to organize your own activities that you've been doing in Excel. So that is the tool that you cannot sort of complain, make excuses for. Okay, but guess what? There's a future tools. Future tools are all there. AI is beginning to be more relevant in data analytics in recent times. And some of us, we even now have to learn how can we use AI for data analytics. We are using ChatGPT for telling us the KPIs that we need to be tracking, how we can create some functions, how we can do some analysis. ChatGPT can give all the information. It is becoming a superpower, a powerhouse for a lot of things that we do with data. So a lot of the platforms are connecting with these kind of AI tools, Copilot and all. And there are instances where you even have to just give a command, tell the AI what it should do with the data. It's going to generate the dashboard, everything. It's just going to give you a code. You paste it into whichever tool you are using, whether it's Power BI, just paste it in there. It's going to generate the dashboard automatically. So we need to catch up. Okay, and then we are talking about Internet of Things integrations. So a lot of wearables are having, ways of giving real-time data, doing real-time data analytics. So there are some type of helmets that is able to, a lot of things. Maybe I have to sort of do some research on it, but there are a lot of wearables. I mean, if you do your research, maybe gas detectors now can send a signal, apart from the fact that it's going to beep to alert you that there is maybe H2S or any type of toxic gas around. So you have to sort of move away. Maybe you can also send an alert straight away. to a certain control room that somebody is exposed to H2S, and for that reason, we need to quickly intervene. We need to sort of do some proactive intervention. So they're all there. More advanced visualization. So AI is running very fast. IoT devices are increasing in number by the day. If you don't catch up with all of this, you'll be left behind, and you'll still probably be making excuses for Excel, which is even the basic of all. Okay. So how do you begin your career, or you begin your HSE data journey? Build foundation, take online courses, understand basic mathematics, know the data types. If you're collecting quantitative data, what kind of analysis can you do on quantitative data? Number of toolbox stocks. What kind of analysis are you going to be doing with that? You can do a summation. I'm summing the number of toolbox I've done. It's a total sum. I can do an average of it. I can count the maximum value, the minimum value. I'm using Excel to do it, so I know the functions for it. Or I'm using Power BI to do it, so I know the measures I can use. I know how to do my basic data visualization. I can bring a lot more value to the table. If I go for meetings, I have my laptop, I have my dashboard. I look very important in a meeting because I'm the only person who has something very important to share. I can display it on a screen. And then again, you should start, building projects. Now, we are talking about, in recent times, I'm sort of trying to drive the fact that every week we need to create dashboards. Okay, so we are trying to grow a community where civic professionals will be challenged to create dashboards. And trust me, myself, that I'm driving this, I'm learning a lot. But the fact is that based on what I do on a regular, every week I'm creating a project. And the project is like a data set, simply a data set, and I'm supposed to do analysis and create a dashboard out of it. But you can start from your workplace as well. Your near miss records, your training records, all these things that are in paper, log, file somewhere. Have a system of extracting the data and put it in an Excel sheet, organize it nicely, and start to analyze it. And I'll go to your top management or send it as weekly reports. They'll tell you, your company will realize that this safety guy is like he knows safety power. He's able to send us report on even these things. We are not even paying attention. But this guy is sending us report on a lot of things because he understands the full scope. Again, because safety, traditionally, we don't talk so much about data. So it's like you don't even know who is a data expert. So hitherto, when I was trying to even build my career, I have some questions to ask. I'm like, actually, so who can I consult to give me some advice? Who can help me solve this data problem I'm having? Right? Then I'll still have to find it the hard way, go and do research. But ChatGPT is being helpful and all. But again, when you're part of a data community where all they talk about is data, all they talk about is projects, all they talk about is learning data tools, all of that, you are able to build your skill and your interest begins to increase, and you begin to realize that you are in a data world where these people are just passionate about data. And for that reason, that's where you want to be because you know the value of data. And then the last one has to be the fact that you need to practice consistently. So you can learn something you forget. You learn a particular way of solving a problem. If you don't practice every now and then, you're going to forget. And then when you are now challenged to deliver, you realize that, I used to know Excel. I used to know this thing, but I went for Excel class maybe last year there about, but I didn't practice and I've forgotten. And it is very common. People go for classes, they do some training for them in some type of tool, but they don't practice afterwards just because they don't have the appetite for data. They don't even know the value of data and all. So practice continuously, okay? So data literacy is not just a technical skill. It is strategic thinking, it is career acceleration, it saves life. And the future belongs to the safety guys who know how to maximize the value of data. So some of us, I can tell you, if I find myself, if I find myself in a company where I need to prove to them that I know the value of it, I will show them like, yes, I really know the value of it, and everything they're doing, I'm going to put it in a well-structured manner. I'm going to be sharing with them every insight they need from every activity they are doing. So then the value increases. So you go to a company, you are positioned as a business partner, and they know your worth. Do you understand? So this is a challenge to everyone. Don't think that Data is far-fetched. What's he talking about? What's data? I mean, data, but data is everything that you are doing every single day. So that's pretty much it, guys. This brings to an end my presentation. I think that we have not exhausted the time too much, right?